All right. So we're going to get to one of the biggest events of the 1960s. Um, uh, Bruce Spicer is, I printed out a biography, but it really, the guy is just an unbelievable expert on the Beatles. I mean, he's written so many books. He is really an amazing expert on the Beatles. And to have him as a New Orleanian and to be here, I'm very happy to have him and talking about such an amazing event that I believe everyone in New Orleans attended. Isn't that right, Bruce?
Well, everyone claimed they attended, but we know that's not the case.
Well, thank you for speaking today, and we're gonna go with Bruce, and then we're gonna take a short break after Bruce speaks, uh, and then we'll and then and so we're gonna get started with Bruce here. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, and can you acknowledge, can you all see the full screen now?
We do not have the screen yet, so you need to hit that. That's let's see, the share the screen.
Okay, let's see. And where am I going to find that
At
one?
the bottom, if you're looking at the screen,
okay, share screen.
Everybody's faces, yeah, you can hit share screen.
Share screen. Okay.
And now you're going to pick your
PowerPoint up. So now we're seeing that?
Yep. And now you're going to want to start it like you do a regular PowerPoint. There you go. Great.
All right. Now we're in business. Okay. So anyway, this talk is called Beatles Day in New Orleans, which was Wednesday, September 16th, 1964. Now, normally I give a talk on how Beatlemania evolved in America, and that could take about an hour. So here's about a 1-minute version, because you kind of need to have things put in proper perspective. So the Beatles in 1963 had 3 records released in the United States on small labels. Please, Please Me, From Me to You, and She Loves You. And as Paul McCartney famously said, Please, Please Me, flop. From Me to You, flop. She Loves You, flop. So the Beatles later signed to Capitol Records, who had turned them down 4 times. And Capitol let us know the Beatles were coming. They couldn't describe the music, so they focused on the hair. And these stickers were plastered all over the place, letting the world know the Beatles are coming. And for most of us, it was probably I Want to Hold Your Hand. In my case, I heard it on the Newman school bus in early January, and that's when I fell in love with the Beatles. Now, She Loves You was re-released. It raced up the charts. Please, Please Me was re-released. It raced up the charts. VJ issued an album introducing the Beatles. Capitol put out the album Meet the Beatles. And even album cuts were getting airplay. Ringo singing I Want to Be Your Man got tremendous airplay because Ringo was the most popular Beatle in America, believe it or not. And the Beatles made their famous Ed Sullivan Show appearance where 73 million people tuned in. They then played a concert at the Washington Coliseum. They played Carnegie Hall, and they came back to do a Sullivan Show in Miami. They taped another bit for a Sullivan Show, and then they headed back. And here we see a Pan Am Boeing 707 that was renamed Jet Clipper Beatles for the occasion. We see all of the fans at the airport packed to see the Beatles off, and familiar faces of policemen trying to control the whole thing. And keep that picture in mind because we have, of course, things going on in New Orleans. So it was a highly successful trip for the Beatles, and Brian Epstein wanted to bring the Beatles back to America. And so he began setting up a North America tour that would take place in August, September of 1964. And of course, New Orleans wanted to be part of it. But why would the Beatles want to play New Orleans? After all, New Orleans was a relatively small market. The reason was the Beatles loved New Orleans music, such as Fats Domino. They had even done 3 songs by Larry Williams, Slow Down, Bad Boy, Dizzy Miss Lizzie, and used other of his songs in their stage show. They had this crazy idea that they would play a concert in New Orleans and have a vacation day the next day where they would be able to walk around the French Quarter, maybe go to some music clubs and absorb that great New Orleans rhythm and blues music. So that was their fantasy. Now, the contract itself, you'll see, the show was set for September 16th, and the local promoter was Herb Holloway with Holiday Productions. It would be at City Park Stadium, and the Beatles would be paid a guarantee of $20,000. This was extremely cheap. The Beatles normally were a lot more. than that for the guarantee, often 40, 50, 60,000. So Herb Holiday got a really good deal because he said, this is all we can really do. The contract itself had a rider. Some of these are very interesting to take a look at. The purchaser will have to supply policemen of not less than 100 uniformed officers, and they would have to be there an hour before and stick around for 30 minutes. Of course, they could have more. They would also arrange for one general press conference the day of the engagement. Here's the incredible thing about this Beatles tour. Everywhere the Beatles went, there was a press conference because it was the most important event in the city that day and perhaps that week. And then tying in with one of the earlier talks that we had, or perhaps two of the earlier talks we had, artists, and all three earlier talks, I stand corrected, artists will not be required to perform before a segregated audience. So therefore, it would have to be an integrated audience for the concert. Well, where are the Beatles going to stay? New Orleans had some very fine hotels. Would they stay in a downtown hotel? Well, no downtown hotel really wanted them. So the Beatles stayed at the Congress Inn out on Chef Mentor Highway. Now, I know a lot of you are laughing and giggling about the Chef Mentor Highway way out in New Orleans East. But actually, let's think of how this hotel was marketed. Here we see the Times-Picayune picture of the construction of this motel from February 1963. And it was touted as the space age. It was 2 minutes from Michoud. And if you look at the matchbook, it had the Coach House, finest and famed New Orleans food, superb Mardi Gras lounge, and look at all the guest services, an Olympic pool, water skiing, deluxe billiard lounge, all these wonderful things. So it really wasn't that, well, maybe it really was, but anyway. So the Times-Picayune, when it opened up, had an article on it. And we see in the article, Congress Inn, new luxury for visitors. And it talked about the fact that it was a $1.2 million investment. There were 100 rooms. And in addition, there was a large executive suite, 1,000 square feet of space in one wing of the main building, handsomely appointed, accompanied with modern furnishings, a bar with a refrigerator, dressing rooms, and card tables. This, of course, is where the Beatles would stay. There was also the Q room, which was a billiard room. And of course, that wonderful Coach House restaurant, rivaled only by Galatoire's and Antoine's. So that was a bit about the College Inn. And here we see a picture of the Q room. And what's interesting about this is where the Beatles press conference would take place. Of course, the billiard tables would be removed. And this was the Coach House restaurant. So the Beatles, the night before, had played in Cleveland, and they took this type of American Flyer electric turboprop to New Orleans. And well, as the paper reported, Beatles slip in Orleans amid comedy of errors. What happened? Well, they were going to land the plane at Lakefront Airport, but best laid plans. They would be greeted by fans there. Councilman Dan Kelly, who would be representing Mayor Vic Skiro, would present a proclamation to the Beatles. The Orleans Levee Board, Milton Dupree, would be there representing Governor John McKithen. And then they would take a helicopter to Congress Inn. So that was the plan. What happened? The helicopter blew an engine. So limousines that were supposed to be sent to Lakefront Airport were sent to Moyzane Airport by mistake. So Captain Press Cooper, the pilot of the plane, was also a little bit concerned about landing at Lakefront Airport due to the weight of his airplane, but quite frankly, it could have handled that. But anyway, the decision was made, and he was going to ditch the landing at Lakefront, make a course change, and head toward Moyzane. The limousines were told to stay at Moyzane, and NOPD sped Councilman Kelly to Moyzane so he would be able to greet the Beatles. The levee board called it a night. And here we see disappointed Beatlettes who were at the wrong airport. And here we see Moyzane Airport in the 60s at nighttime. And well, right place in the right time. We could have the Dr. John song, but how about these two people? Ramp agents Noah LeBlanc and Albert Jacob were told to stay late to assist a diverting Electra. Turned out it was the Beatles. So they helped the Beatles and their entourage with the luggage. They emptied the cargo bin and put it in the limousines. In NOPD and the Kenner police formed a motorcade to Congress Inn. According to the paper, with sirens were screaming louder than their fans. Well, there was no interstate set up in those days, so what was the long and winding road? They went down Airline Highway, David Drive, Veterans Highway, Pontchartrain Boulevard, Robert E. Lee Boulevard. Let me take you down to Elysian Fields, Leon C. Solomon Drive, Dowman Road, Morrison Highway, Patterson Road, Chef Montier Highway, and finally, there they are at the Congress Inn. Well, the comedy of errors continued at the Congress Inn because the limousine took a wrong turn. Rather than going to the entrance, he turned off somewhere else, and they were followed by screaming fans. Girls rushed and surrounded the cars, and the police finally had to get rid of the hysterical youths. The driver turned his limo around, and as the paper said, missing the do or die teenagers, but smacking into a Kenner police car. And it was even worse because he was supposed to drop the Beatles off at their 3-room suite, number 100, but instead pulled to the main entrance. And so here they were at the main entrance, and they had to navigate their way to the lobby. Some fans managed to get inside the lobby. And here we see Ringo. And we see in the paper the other Beatles are now instigators of all the Beatlemania, arriving at like 2 or 3 in the morning at the Congress Inn out on Chef Montier Highway. The final snafu, the Beatles wanted some sandwiches, but the kitchen was closed. So food was ordered from Martin Brothers Restaurant. How many people remember Martin Brothers Restaurant? Anyway, that's where the food came from. And the Times-Picayune reported that Councilman Kelly never got to welcome the Beatles, but he did get to pose with 3 teenagers from Memphis who took the train to Union Passenger Terminal in a cab to Congress Inn. The manager of the Congress Inn, he was so impressed that they had come down from Memphis that he allowed them to be guests at the motel that evening free of charge. A very nice gesture. And the Picayune reported a 15-year-old Creeby Clay waiting in the lobby at 3 a.m. Distraught teenager gave a Kenner policeman a doll to give to Ringo with all her love. And then there was a story of an 11-year-old who had slipped out of her house without her parents knowing and somehow made it to Lakefront Airport and Congress Inn all on her own. I guess she was relying on the kindness of strangers. The Times-Picayune reported that there were about 100 fans at the Congress Inn. Most of them had previously been at Lakefront Airport. Only 8 fans figured out what was going on and were at the correct airport when the Beatles arrived. And here we see a picture of Karen de Hority, and she did not get to touch her idols. And we see Kenner Deputy Anthony Janusa looking on disbelievingly. Well, the Beatles decided, here we have the screen, I'm only sleeping. They were going to hope to see New Orleans, but they slept all day. And at 3:45 p.m., they ordered ham and eggs and orange juice for a very late breakfast, and then they dressed for their 7 p.m. press conference. And this press conference was held in the Q room at the Congress Inn. And here we see the Congress Inn sign, "Welcome Beatles to the Congress Inn, New Orleans East." And we get an idea of the bit of the pandemonium involved. Their press officer, Derek Taylor, asked, "Are there any non-journalists here?" And no one admitted to being a non-journalist, not even the 5-year-olds. And here we see one of those 5-year-olds getting a copy of her book, John Lennon's book, and John being kind enough to sign that for her. Mayor Vic Skiro presented each of the Beatles with a key to the city and a certificate of honorary citizenship. And John said, "I want to put my arm around you. You look like a nice fellow, Lord Mayor." And here we see Skiro with the Beatles. For those of you with sharp eyes, you will notice that thing of George on the right was pasted in. So Skiro was only with 3 of the Beatles. They pasted George in to get him in the picture. And then he presented the Beatles with a proclamation. "Whereas the Beatles are coming, which whereas this event will be acknowledged, assented to, and even acclaimed by presumably a large segment of our people. And whereas the Beatles do and sing is based on a cousinship with jazz, the jumping, danceable, historic art form which New Orleans has contributed to world culture. And whereas in order to be hospitable to our English cousins, the Beatles, who will serenade New Orleans in the hurricane month of September, it devolves upon myself to officially welcome this English storm. Now, therefore, I, Victor H. Skiro, Mayor of the City of New Orleans, do hereby proclaim the day, Wednesday, September 16, 1964, to be Beatles Day in New Orleans." Being a very shrewd mayor, Mayor Vic Skiro got the Beatles to do something no other head of a municipality ever did. He got the Beatles to sign that proclamation. And there are their signatures, along with the seal of the City of New Orleans. And here we actually see a picture of Paul McCartney signing the proclamation as the other Beatles look on. After it was done, the mayor started to leave, and John noticed he had left the pen on the table, and he said, "You forgot your pen, Lordship." So Skiro was treated royally by the Beatles. And here we see the actual proclamation of Beatles Day in New Orleans, signed by all of the Beatles. The press conference then continued. Reporter, what do you like most about being wealthy? Ringo, money. Reporter, what do you think of topless bathing suits? Paul, we've been wearing them for years. There we see Brian with his boys. Reporter, what do you think of New Orleans girls? John, we haven't seen any yet. They've been stuck inside a motel room on Chef Ventura Highway. Do you intend to visit New Orleans again when we're older? And here we see the Beatles. They aged tremendously during just sitting there. The Beatles thought New Orleans was the roughest spot on their American tour. They blamed it on the mix-ups of arrival plans and a total lack of security at the Congress Inn. Here we see, while this was going on, meanwhile, in New Orleans, fans are gathering at City Park Stadium for the concert itself. And these are the tickets. You will notice the ticket price was $5. You will also see the concert was sponsored by WNOE, Herb Holloway Productions, but WTIX stole the evening from WNOE. They sent all of their boss jocks out there and they distributed these little flyers. It said, WTIX welcomes you to this Beatle concert. So very sneaky. And it said, enjoy yourself, have fun, and listen to WTIX after the show. I know that must have made WNOE very happy. And you'll notice this thing was also, this one was signed by two of the boss jocks, Skip Wilkerson and Johnny Fever. So WTIX hijacked the concert. They also had pictures that you could get handed out there or purchase, I would imagine, for $1 of the Beatles. And here we see the girls at the gates of heaven waiting to be let into the seating. The seating was general admission. And before the Beatles came on, we had the Bill Black Combo, which kind of served as the house band. We had the Exciters, who had a big hit, Tell 'Em. We had Jackie DeShannon, When You Walk in the Room, and Clarence Frogman Henry, who was from New Orleans. Frogman Henry, halfway through the tour, replaced the Righteous Brothers, who left the tour because they were sick of hearing fans yell, "We want the Beatles! We want the Beatles!" And Clarence Frogman was a good replacement. And how did he get the gig? Well, he was managed by the same person who set up the tour, GAC. And we see Frogman with the Beatles. And here we see Fats Domino and the Beatles. Eric Paulson, who many of you know from Channel 4, asked Fats Domino, when the Beatles were in New Orleans, did you get to meet them? To which Fats famously replied, no, the Beatles got to meet me, which pretty much says it all. So now we're at that great time of the program where we're going to have a bit of the concert. What I've done is I've taken the audio, and you'll have to listen carefully to hear it, of the actual City Park Stadium concert when the Beatles are talking. And because the quality is so poor, I have edited it together with another 1964 concert from the Hollywood Bowl. And it's been edited a bit. I'm going to let this play for a while, but listen carefully and you will hear the voices of John and Paul in New Orleans, September 16th, 1964.
Bruce, we don't have any audio yet.
Uh-oh, how do I get audio?
Maybe hit that play button down in the bottom left.
Okay, we're going to temporarily stop the concert. Now, how do I get audio on my computer to share it? Because I thought I was sharing the computer audio as well. So help me quickly.
Where's the audio on your computer? You could just play it regularly and it should play.
Okay. Okay. Audio on my computer. Where's a 5-year-old when you need one? Okay. So what do I do? Anybody help?
Well, where do you have if you were to play that audio, where would you go to play it?
I mean, I'm running it through the way I've run it through before.
Yeah, it may be going into your earphones. That's probably what it is. Maybe unplug your earphones and then go back to what you were doing.
Okay. I don't think that'll do it, but we'll try. I think that's where I have to share audio. So share computer sound. That should do it. Okay.
Yeah, let's see if that works.
Now let's try it back again. And let's go back to PowerPoint. Let's close this out. Can you still hear and see me?
We can still hear and see you, yes.
You can hear me now? Okay. All right, let's go back to slideshow. And let's go from here. And we're going to go from current slide. Are we getting any audio?
No audio yet.
No audio. Okay. No audio. Why not? I'm screen sharing. Share computer sound. Okay. That should do it. Now, how do I get rid of this screen?
Let's see. Yeah, it might be a mic, as someone is saying.
Okay, let's try this. Let's try again from current slide. I'm going to make this the current slide. Current slide. Are we getting audio or not?
No, we're just getting you.
And this is exactly what I did the last time I did one of these. Okay, my apologies. Because it says share computer sound, so it should be sharing it. I don't
You're hearing
understand
it in your headphones?
No, I'm not.
No, you're not hearing it on your phone. Okay, so that answers that one.
I was hearing it before.
No, we're not getting any audio. Maybe we'll have to send it to everybody afterwards in a file.
Yeah, what we'll do then, we'll keep going, unfortunately, and maybe we'll be able to figure it out. Can you hear me now? Are you getting audio?
Hello.
Did you get that at all?
Thank you very much and good evening. How are you? Can you hear this? Yeah? Good.
Yep, we're hearing it.
Thank you. The next song we're going to try and sing through these loudspeakers. Another old song of ours from last year. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello. The song's called She Loves You.
Okay, so now that we have the audio back, the next one's interesting because what the Beatles would typically do about halfway through the show, before they would do Can't Buy Me Love, Paul would ask for the audience to participate. And as you're going to see from some of the photographs during Can't Buy Me Love, they really took it to heart. So this is going to be the chaos that ensues.
Thank you very much. Oh well, I was going to say something, but I won't bother. we'd like you to join in with this song, if you will. Will you join in with the song? Okay? It's easy. All you got to do, as we're singing, clap your hands. Just clap your hands. Okay? Clap your hands. Or if you don't want to clap your hands, stamp your feet on the floor. Yeah, that's it. Clap and stamp. Make a bit of noise. The song we'd like to sing is called Can't Buy Me Love. Thank you, folks. Those of you who are still alive.
And so there was John saying, thank you, folks, those of you who are still alive. And here's an interesting picture. You'll notice this is a girl in a wheelchair, but if you look closely, you will see above her shoulder there are empty wheelchairs. So apparently, one of two things happened. Either during the Beatles concert, some of the girls in wheelchairs who had serious injuries were miraculously cured by the Beatles, or more likely, several high school girls rented wheelchairs and had one of their friends push them in wheelchairs so they would be on the field closer to the Beatles. There's also some footage of the concert that was shot by WDSU TV. Here you can see mounted policemen as well there. So it was quite a crazy time. Now, the most popular Beatle, as I've said before, was Ringo. So here we have Ringo from New Orleans doing Boys, and we'll see the pictures of Ringo in action. And also, listen to this one on John. John, when he introduces the next song, he makes reference to the people playing on the football pitch, which of course will be British for football field.
Anyway, the title song from the film we just made, and it's called So before we go, we'd like to say to everybody here tonight, including the football players, thank you very much for coming along. Thank you very much. And we hope, thank you. And we hope We hope you enjoyed the show. We'd like to finish off with a song which we recorded, which was written by Little Richard.
Thirty minutes, but total excitement. I don't think the kids could have taken any more than that. My apologies for the audio glitch. I forgot to hit the share computer audio thing. So next time I hopefully won't make that mistake. And for those of you who make the mistake, that's a simple fix. Then the Beatles got into the limousine and were rushed back, this time to the airport so they could go on to their next concert, which was Kansas City. They were going to have a day off in New Orleans. However, Charlie Finley, who owned the Kansas City Athletics, wanted as a matter of civic pride to have the Beatles play Kansas City. He was told by Brian it was their day off. He offered a guarantee of $100,000. It eventually worked his way up to $150,000, to which the Beatles could not turn that down. So they missed a day off in New Orleans for $150,000. There was plenty of coverage, of course, in the local Times-Picayune and New Orleans State's item, focusing on Beatlemania in City Park. And it was mainly focusing on the Bedlam, Beatles spark riot by teen fans. So it started off, many faint, two injured. The Liverpool sound of Britain's Beatles was the battle anthem that started a mob of New Orleans teenagers into a riot at City Park Stadium last night. Screaming, howling, clawing, crying, and even laughing young females, about 700 rioters, according to Police Superintendent Joseph I. Geruso, attempted to storm the bandstand to get at their beloved Beatles. It took the full force of 152 policemen plus 75 hired Pinkerton agents to hold back the surging girls, abetted by a score of teenage boys. They leaped from the stadium onto the field, rushed through a police cordon. Mounted patrolmen assaulted or assisted in the corralling of the main elements. So those NOPD guys on horseback. While elsewhere on the field, police were busy tackling the latecomers who had decided to leave the stands and join the action. We saw pictures of that during Camp Buy Me Love. City Park Stadium will probably never see such inspired broken field running, nor such a determined defense. And for about 15 minutes, they battled police to get to the stage. And then the quote from the police chief was, "I have never seen anything like this. I have never seen anything so amusing and yet so tragic." One boy suffered a broken jaw. Another girl had a broken arm. Neither one of them would allow medical aid until after the concert. And there was actually ammonium administered to about 150 fainting females. Policemen alternately charged the young adversaries and treated those who had collapsed with smelling salts. So quite a night of work for them. And even after the Beatles left, the crowd would not leave. girls with tears in their eyes, some with a glassy stare of one under hypnosis. They stood there looking at the stage, and others picked up the grass where the Beatles had trod upon. The concert began at 8. The Beatles took the stage at 9:25. Remember, they had all those warm-up groups. The crowd was estimated at about 13,000, so about half the capacity of 26,500, but it was a Wednesday night. And they said when the Beatles arrived, the din bested that of even Tiger Stadium when LSU meets Ole Miss. And the Beatles, of course, went to Kansas City where they got that $150,000. A lot of money in those days, still a decent amount of money today. That's double of what the Cabildo is paying me to give this talk, by the way. And then, of course, there was another one, Teenage Bedlam Reigns. And it talked about the police having their hands full tackling the wild crowd. Once again, about 700, they said, caused this disorder midway through a spirited stage appearance by England's madcap Beatles. Policemen had to physically tackle many of the young, mostly girls, who broke away from the stands, attempting to crash through the barricade, separating them from the long-haired singers. The crowd was finally brought under control after police roped off much of the spectators on the sideline of the football field. Now, the Times-Picayune and States-Item had a bunch of columnists that wrote about things, and they had their regular columns, and well, they weren't terribly kind about this. Herman Deutsch, in particular, little help held for Beatlemaniacs. That sick-making exhibition by a lot of pre-accident female lackwits took the rag off the bush, whatever that expression means. These shills contagied others into hysterical excess that would have revolted a shoveler of slaughterhouse refuge. Wow. If the upcoming female generation is typified by the green-sick exhibition that was put out in view at City Park Stadium Wednesday night, then I'm disturbed about what havoc and the next generation of youngsters wreck to the shuddering world. So pretty strong words by Herman. Then we had Lagniappe by Thomas Griffin, and he talked about his experience. He was told that he was asked to do a whole column on the Beatles, so he did. He said it was bedlam, and one couldn't help but wonder what was the secret of the strange effect the Beatles had on their fans to literally mesmerize them to their appeal. He couldn't figure it out. And that was just from the press conference at Congress Inn. He says, as I drove out of the jam-packed parking area, all he could think of was, I'm glad I was getting away in time. I'm happy I'm not going to the stadium. Rumelade, Howard Jacobs, not much better. The pandemonium at City Park Stadium that attended their brief performance Wednesday night was a frightening thing that may have ended in a full-fledged riot except for the numbers and determination of the police department. The spectacle of frantic young adults dashing across the field, utterly oblivious to police lines and personal safety, was a frightening commentary on the terrifying effect of mass hysteria. He went on to say, we doubt that the pagans of old in their wildest orgies were ever more fanatical or possessed than these frenetic young girls as they struggled convulsively with harassed policemen. Explained one of the officers when it was over, if we never get to see the Beatles again, it will be too soon. And Pi Dufour, who did a column called a la mode, he had to eat his own humble pie because he said in February 19th, 64, he said, I'll bet by the summer vacations, the Beatles will be forgotten. And of course, that wasn't the case. And he had to admit the Beatles were not forgotten. They were still going strong. They came to New Orleans and caused teenagers to swoon and almost riot, and spent a month in the U.S. earning over $1 million. He said he hoped to be reinstated with the Beatle lovers of America. And then we see here, and I believe this is a picture of Aunt Jane, who did a column for the Picayune. Aunt Jane had to say that she was impressed by the Beatles as much as the teens were. And what she said was at the press conference, they were friendly, saying that they would really like to get closer to their fans. They were clever, witty, very quick on the uptake, relaxed, well-dressed, and they had thick British accents. She said the Beatles drove out to the stadium field and then the most screaming Aunt Jane, she always talked in the third person, had ever heard anywhere. Flashbulbs popped so effectively that they appeared to be in keeping with the perfect beat with the incomparable Beatles music. And she said, wasn't it fun and exciting? And she said, it doesn't look like they'll be coming back in the foreseeable future, but when they do, which alas, they never did, Aunt Jane hopes she will be there to welcome them again and also see and enjoy them perform. WNOE prepared special items for their listeners. They had cut up bed sheets and microphone parts and some pictures. Here we see the bed sheets, and people were being congratulated for having this wonderful memento to their collection. And they even had the hotel manager attest that this is what it was, and it was even notarized, so you knew it was true. Microphone cords and pictures. Here we see the DJs over at the Congress Inn with the Beatles. And here is a poster, and I know people have bought these and have them on their walls. I got some bad news for you if you believe this is a genuine poster from 1964. It is not. It is what would best be described as a commemorative poster that was made from some paper from that era, and it was done, I believe, in the late 70s, early 80s. Some of you may be fortunate enough to have this VJ Beatles record. At the bottom, there's a banner that says, "Souvenir of their appearance at City Park Stadium, New Orleans." These were not sold at the concert. They were sold in record stores in New Orleans in October of '64. If you're fortunate enough to own one of these, particularly in stereo and mint condition, it would be worth about $5,000 or more. And here is the actual proclamation, once again, of Beatles Day in New Orleans with Vic Schiro. Now, what he did was he got the bright idea to have his picture inserted on that proclamation and make it available for the citizens of New Orleans. If you look at the top, it says, "To a member of the Beatles Battalion, helping to make the city litter free." So what Schiro did was they announced that if you came down to City Hall, and it was about a month after the concert, and you pledged to pick up litter, you would be given free one of these proclamations. Here we see Mayor Schiro swearing in these young teen girls at City Hall. Another picture where they take their pledge to pick up litter. And you can see what a ham Schiro was. He really is enjoying himself with this. Here we see an overhead shot that shows that, alas, Mayor Schiro was bald, and he is signing these pictures. One girl wanted him to sign her arm. You can see her arm has been signed by the mayor. And here we see him not only signing autographs, but also handing out the proclamation and more of those WTIX handbills. Another shot of Schiro dutifully signing away. And the proclamation, this one is of particular significance to me. You'll notice it doesn't have anything about picking up litter. If you, during your class trips, which most of us went on when we were like in third grade, at least it was third grade at Newman, you went to City Hall, you got to sit in the mayor's office, and his chief of staff, who I think probably would have been Jack McGuire, handed these out. And this is the one that was given to me when I was a third grader at Newman School visiting City Hall. And if you want to learn all about the Beatles 64 and 65 tours, a wonderful book by a buddy of mine called Some Fun Tonight by Chuck Gunderson. There's another book Stephen Landry, an attorney up in Baton Rouge, did called Beatles Day in New Orleans. And then my book, The Beatles Are Coming, The Birth of Beatlemania in America. Here you see me wearing a suit, and that suit was the same style suit that the Beatles wore in concert in New Orleans. And I have various books by the Beatles. I've actually written 12 of them. They're available through my website, beatle.net, including digital versions of the VJ and Capitol books. I have solo book, Swan Song book on their Parlophone records, and I've started something new called the album series, The Beatles and Sgt. Pepper, A Fan's Perspective, The Beatles and the White Album and the Launch of Apple, The Beatles Get Back to Abbey Road, and my latest book, The Beatles Finally Let It Be. And The Beatles Are Coming, of course, is The Birth of Beatlemania in America. And the books are available through beatle.net. And now I think I've finished pretty much when you wanted me to finish, and I can answer questions if there are any.
Yeah, and I've also linked to your site as well, to your shop. So if anybody has, would like to buy something with of Bruce's books,
Great.
We'll link that, as well as we'll be linking all the other speakers later on. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, where is the original copy of the proclamation today?
It was lent to a Grammy Museum exhibit on the Beatles. That exhibit is shut down, and so it will be returning to New Orleans shortly.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions? I think you mentioned, Bruce, that this was the only proclamation signed by the Beatles, right?
Yes, the Beatles had never done anything like this at any other municipality. And it wasn't that the Beatles said, hey, we're going to sign this thing. It was actually Mayor Skiro, and it was a really brilliant idea that he came up with. And also, making the photocopies of the proclamation as souvenirs for the citizens of New Orleans. So Skiro, I know that a lot has been said about him, positive, negative, or whatever, but he was pretty cool about this.
Jay Stanley goes back on there and he says about the proclamation, where in New Orleans do you think it's kept?
Hopefully someplace very safe. I will tell you a story about it. Jack McGuire, when he left as chief of staff for Vic Skiro, was told that the mayor's wife had told him, you cannot bring home your mayor's office, and it could be anywhere. You can take whatever items you want. And so he had the proclamation. The proclamation was kept in a desk drawer in the CBD. And a local New Orleans collector, who I won't name, but some of you might be able to figure out who that would be, had discussions with him about purchasing the proclamation. And those discussions were kind of put on time. Hurricane Katrina hit. It flooded Jack's office. The water came up to about the second drawer in his desk. Fortunately, it was in the top drawer of his desk. So otherwise, Hurricane Katrina would have destroyed the proclamation. It does still exist.
Have you ever interviewed any of the girls in the photos?
I've talked to some of the people that were at the concert, obviously. I don't know if particular ones in those particular photos, but I remember one girl telling me that she and one of her friends had gone to a wheelchair rental place and had rented a wheelchair, and that she had pushed her friend who was sitting in a wheelchair. And when the girls ran on, started running toward the stage, her friend miraculously forgot she was supposed to be crippled, got up, ran out of her wheelchair, as did she. And they were disciplined by the school for that, apparently.
Wow. George Marsh, who's one of our tour guides in our organization, said he was 11 years old at the time, and he says, thanks for the memories. He was at the concert. So there you go. You have another person said they were at the concert.
Now, I have a confession to make. I was not at the concert. And that day was one of my sister's birthdays. She turned 16 that day, and she didn't want to spend her birthday with a bunch of screaming people. And she was fans more of Barbra Streisand and Peter, Paul, and Mary. So I did not get to go to the concert. I jokingly tell people that my therapist says one day I may speak to her again, but that is not true. But I was not at that concert. I was not too happy about that, but it was her birthday, and my only way to get to the concert was with my older sisters.
Another question about the proclamation. If it was, what do you think the value of it would be today? And is it officially owned by the city?
I would take the position it's not officially owned by the city.
Okay.
I would take the position that whoever has it might one day donate it to the right place if the right place were to be in New Orleans. The proclamation would probably be valued at, I would say, anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000.
Vera Marsh says that George was not at the concert. She was at the concert. She wanted to make sure that she was the one who was at the concert. A good question about Frogman Henry was one of the opening acts, as well as Bill Black's combo. Did Frogman join any of the other concerts after that?
Yeah, he did. He was on half the tour. What happened was the Righteous Brothers were on the tour. This was before they had done You've Lost That Loving Feeling. They were doing kind of some rhythm and blues, soul-eye blues things, such as Little Latin Loopaloo and things like that. And when they were on stage, they were tired of hearing We Want the Beatles. And I think Forest Hills was the last show that they did with the Beatles. They asked if they could be let off the tour, and GAC agreed. And because GAC also managed Clarence Frogman Henry, he got the gig. At the time, he was doing a gig and did it for many, many years on Bourbon Street. So he actually stopped doing his Bourbon Street gig for a couple of weeks to do the second half of the Beatles tour. And then he went back to doing his Bourbon Street gig after the tour.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Bruce. We really appreciate it.
My My apologies for the audio glitch.
No,
Maybe
no,
you
no,
can
absolutely.
edit
We're
out that middle
quite
bit.
well, and we're
Okay.
actually back on time. So we have about 20 minutes to 20 minutes to